but we're continuing our tradition of having a featured reader, which we're very excited about, as well as 9 additional local writers. And this evening we're joined by Louis Bayard, who I'm gonna embarrass you and read your fancy bio to everyone. In the words,
the fancy one? You were gonna read the fancy one.
The fancy one.
Right.
In the words of the New York Times, Louis Bayard reinvigorates historical fiction, rendering the past as if he'd witnessed it firsthand. His acclaimed historical novels include Courting Mr. Lincoln, Roosevelt's Beast, The School of Night, The Black Tower, The Pale Blue Eye, and Mr. Timothy, as well as the highly praised young adult novel Lucky Strikes. A New York Times notable author, he's been nominated for both the Edgar and Dagger Awards, and his story Banana Triangle 6 was chosen for the Best American Mystery Stories 2018. His reviews and articles have appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, and Salon. An instructor at George Washington University, he is a board member for the Penn Faulkner Foundation and the author of popular Downton Abbey recaps for the New York Times. And we're so excited that you're willing to join us on this journey tonight. Lou, take it away.
Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me? I just want to check that. Everybody can hear me okay? Good. Because I'm going to kind of go to another screen at some point, but I wanted to thank you all for inviting me. I'm sorry I can't waste a glass with you in person, but I'm happily wasting it in absentia. I wanted to salute my fellow writers on the docket tonight, including Zach Salih, my fellow Algonquian. So these days I'm working on a courtship novel about Jack Kennedy and Jackie Bouvier, taking place right here in Washington, D.C., circa 1952. But I thought, given the times, I'd read from a work of the moment. So this is my work in progress. It builds to some kind of crime or some kind of horror, or at least it will. And if any of you have any suggestions on what that crime or horror should be, I'm all ears. But for now, this is the prelude. It's, oh gosh, where is it? Here we go. It's, the working title is Notes on a Sourdough Starter. Day 1. Remember, Celia texts me, it's a living thing. As with all her texts, there's a faint note of reproach. She wants me to feel as if she's just deposited a child with me. Maybe not her firstborn, but definitely the 3rd or 4th. And she's apologizing in the next text that she can't let me keep the container she sent it in, the container she practically tossed onto my doorstep before galloping back to her car. And in the next text, she encourages me to put it in a container of my own, only don't bleach the container, just a thorough going over with filtered water because chlorine will kill it too. And I keep thinking this thing, this it, is barely in my door and it's practically already dead. Even if it survives tonight in the cracked mason jar that I believe was originally given to us by our neighbor as a vessel for pickled beets, the jar that I'm only just now realizing I forgot to hose down with filtered water, even if it survives tonight, I'm guessing its chances of making it through another day are pretty slim, because for a living thing, it looks awfully still, which makes 2 of us. I mean, how long have we been sheltering in place and still not a day goes by that I don't ask myself, has time stopped or have I? Maybe it would be different if I were working. If I were working, I wouldn't feel obligated to take up a hobby for the sake of taking up a fucking hobby. Baking. Jesus. Of course, Celia keeps insisting it's not a hobby, it's a way of connecting with our ancestors. For thousands of years, she says, this was how everyone made bread. You know, well, a year ago, nobody I know was even eating bread. Remember? We treated it like a chalice of poison. You'd go out to a club and down any amount of carbs in liquid form. But if someone so much as thrust a slice of bruschetta in your face, it was all, get thee behind me, Satan. Now, the same people who used to recoil from dinner rolls are buying up shelves of King Arthur flour. I mean, this is the real pandemic. Millions of loaves rising up from millions of quarantined kitchens. And who, I want to know, is going to eat them all? I will, says Dave. I love bread. And why does Dave love bread? Dave loves bread because he doesn't put on weight. He can still fit in the tux from our wedding, and that was 7 years ago. He would probably argue that he remains thin because of all the exercise he does. And who am I to dispute him? Because these days I get to see it all happening. Every squat and lunge, every plyometric push-up in the bedroom, the foyer, on the living room carpet. If I get up and leave the room, he actually follows me. Hey babe, can you hold down my feet while I do my crunches? Hey babe, you like seeing me all sweaty like this? Is it putting any ideas in your head? No, I want to tell him. Those ideas left on the very first day of quarantine when I found him cutting his toenails at the dining room table. Yep, in that moment, Eros then curled up and died. And there's been no rousing him since. Just like there's no rousing Celia's starter, it will sit there in that mason jar forever, dying by degrees. Well, there's no point in putting off my newest failure any longer. I find the warmest part of my kitchen, which turns out to be the top of the fridge. And when I tuck the jar away, I actually hear myself say, good night, which is as clear a sign as any of how bad it's gotten. Good night, my little sourdough starter. A little after 10, I get a text from Celia. Don't forget to feed it, exclamation point. Day 2, I nearly forget to feed it. In fact, I forget all about it completely until about 10 minutes to 11. I'm sprawled in bed, watching the same episode of Schitt's Creek as the night before, waiting for the Advil PM to kick in. When the thought comes crawling into my half-awake brain, like Celia's voice, marbled with disappointment, it's hungry, Janie. In the next second, I'm grabbing my slippers and rushing down the stairs and reaching for the jar and opening the lid. A wave of pungent gas swells up and I blow it back out of my nostrils. I gaze down at that inert beige form. It's then I realize I don't have the feeding formula. Celia sent it by email and I have to find my phone and mount a search for it. And by then, well, all I can see is this little dying thing committed to my trust, soon to be a non-starter. In a panic, I plunge my hand into a bag of flour and toss a handful into the jar. Then I pour in some water from the sink and I mix it with a pair of chopsticks from Young Chow Takeout. The influx of liquid seems to give it a fresher color. And I watch in relief as a single bubble rises to the surface, swells unexpectedly, and then lightly bursts, releasing not vapor, or not just vapor, but a softly strangled sound. In the next moment, I could swear that sound coheres into a word. No, 2 words. Thank you. Day 3. Celia comes by the next morning to collect her container. She asked me to leave it on the front porch so our microclimates won't intersect. I can't explain why, but the sight of her stirs something in me. I realize I don't want her to leave just yet. So I say in a voice that instantly registers as pathetic, well, I fed it. That's great. Celia's eyes brighten above her mask. That's really great, Janie. Now, I probably should have reminded you, but did I mention you have to take some out before you feed it? Of course, it's all there in the formula. So, I mean, if you follow the steps, you can't go wrong. She turns to leave again. And once again, I stop her. Hey, is your starter supposed to thank you, is what I'm about to say. Is your starter supposed to thank you? And the fact that I don't allow these words to leave my mouth is maybe the only thread still tethering me to sanity. Hours later, I can even amuse myself imagining what her response would have been. Well, it darn well should, I imagine her saying as she sprints back to her Toyota Prius plug. That night, I make a point of feeding the starter before I go to bed. The formula is useless because it's all in grams and I don't have a scale. So after tossing a hunk of it into the sink, I fall back on last night's feed by feel method. The result is the same, a deepening of color, a soft rumbling from below, and then a single bubble breaking the surface. Smells pretty funky, says Dave. Little twinkle toes. He's crept up behind me and wrapped his arms around my midsection. He's breathing damply in my ear. Well, sure, I say. I mean, it's fermenting. It's what it does. When do you actually make bread from it? Well, I mean, I'll have to check. There are very strict rules about this, though I don't remember what they are. One of his hands slides up, one slides down. I'm about to suggest some other time tomorrow morning, next year, some other wife, maybe. I close my eyes, the better to gather my resistance. And when I open them, the bubble has expanded beyond what I would have thought possible. Maybe 1.5 inches in diameter, as wet and shiny as spun glass, no longer growing, not shrinking, sure as hell not popping, just biting, watching. Hey babe, says Dave, you got a fever or something? You're shaking all over. And that is the end of that particular work in progress. So as I've said, happy to, I see happy things. Happy to take suggestions on how this ends. I think the bread has to get eaten by somebody and something has to happen, but at any rate, I should also add, I think this fragment is gonna be published on the Washingtonian website next week. So if you have any thoughts, I'm all ears, as I said. And thank you very much for including me in this. This has been fun.
That was awesome. Thank you.
You should go through and read the chat because there was lots of reactions.
I couldn't stop laughing, and like everything was hitting home. I was like, all of the things.
I was laughing so hard I couldn't hear half the story because every line was making me laugh. So now we're gonna have a bunch of readers in fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. We'll have 3 before we do our little fun intermission experiment. So you can continue to feel anxious until we make you socialize. So kicking us off in nonfiction is Alicia Defonso.
And I'll still be timing everyone, so you know this is like normal here, folks.
Hey guys. Oh, do you want me to just get started now?
Yeah, go for
I'm
it.
supposed to follow that? Great. Thanks so much. Thanks for coming, everybody, and thanks to Interloop for celebrating writers. I'm so thankful for this opportunity and hope that next time we can do this in person. You know, hopefully soon. You know, the excerpt that I'm going to be reading is from my larger work, but it was recently published in Cobalt Review. It's called The Turk. And so my forthcoming book is basically a time warp where I retrace my grandfather's tour through World War II Europe from D-Day to VE Day, and also the life of a young SS soldier whose diary he finds on the battlefields. And this excerpt's just a little taste of my nonfiction narrative coming up. So I hope you guys enjoy it and remember this when Memorial Day comes in 2 weeks. And I'm going to try to time myself too. The Turk. In the 3 months since D-Day, Private First Class Anthony Del Rossi had developed a new name and reputation. The 629th Combat Engineers called him the Turk. Without a shower and proper shaving supplies in months, Del had grown a thick, pointed black beard like the sultans of the cinema. He also turned his machete into a throwing knife by his side. For a laugh, he might toss a German concussion grenade over his shoulder, which could knock a man unconscious or burst his eardrum. Never injured anyone, just like the loud crack in the open air. Pull the pin and pop. The Robin's egg-shaped bomb could slide into a foxhole practically unnoticed. They didn't want it to kill you, he said. The thing was, if a man was injured from the grenade, it took 6 other guys to help him. That's 7 men now not holding the line. Less people you got to deal with. The landscapes of France, Belgium, and Luxembourg had revealed all sorts of German devices. When you tripped the S-mine, he said, you had 3 seconds. It would pop up a couple feet, then blow up, taking a limb or 2. And the castrator, well, if you stepped on the cartridge, it shot an explosion into the upper thigh or groin and could castrate a man. Nazis were pretty clever. Even I could never have thought that up. But Del indeed found ways to match excess technology. That was his talent after all, explosives. When GIs made rounds through abandoned villages, some engineers would place a pressure explosion on the front doorstep when they knew that the German army was close behind. One step on the porch would kill a German or two, but Dell didn't do that. He felt they figured it out anyway. Instead, he would find the one portrait of Hitler displayed in almost every occupied house. He placed electrical contacts behind the frame and tilted it sideways. He wired the rest. If Waffen-SS searched the place, 9 times out of 10, he said, they would straighten the portrait. They were too anal to let it go. When they fixed the frame, the whole house would blow. No man would ever get wise to his design because no man ever made it out alive. That was the Turk. Spotting a damn SS trooper was easy, he said. They were too young. They had no business being there. Most were blonde-haired, blue-eyed, just out of school. Some as young as 15, recruited to fight and hate until a bullet to the head. No surrender. Dell sometimes wondered if they realized what they were getting into, but that didn't matter now. He crouched in the flurries to give the body a once-over, make sure the German was gone. The Belgian frost makes it tough to tell how long someone's been dead. Looks like a hole clean through the skull, crisps of blood at the entry point. He's spent, Dell said. Come on, said the lieutenant. Grab his tags. Standard protocol. Grab the dog tags and go. Turn them into your CO. Tally another dead German. But sometimes they didn't turn them in. Dell said, it depended. If the guy was non-compliant, or your buddy just got killed, or you're just fucking freezing and had enough, then you wanted the guy to disappear. He would be forever lost to his country, his family, missing in action. They would never have confirmation of death, and that was enough to make some GIs feel better. Dell felt around the neck. Nothing. Checking through stiff fatigues, there was no identification on his person. This nameless kid was just vanishing into the snow. Dell patted the body and found a hard patch worked into a coat seam. He pulled out a black, leather-bound journal imprinted with infamous 2 lightning bolts, a Waffen-SS diary. He flipped through the pages for a name, but it was all in German. Dell only made out bits of an anthem and supply list. He couldn't read the handwriting. The whole thing seemed useless until out fell black and white. Full uniform, blonde hair, but the soldier looked older in the picture than the cold body on the ground. Perhaps it was the tired eyes. He is posing with a round-faced girl, dark hair done up in curls. The couple is half smiling. What you got, Turk? Time to move. He shoved the SS diary and photograph into his jacket. He wasn't sure why. Dell usually didn't hunt for souvenirs like other GIs, but this he confiscated. He should have turned it in, but no one was looking, so he broke code. I got nothing. He glanced down at the deceased and whispered, sorry, pal. The Turk caught up to the others, and they trudged together through the miserable winter. He wanted to keep moving, and for damn sure stop thinking. The kid is just another SS trooper. Thank you.
Why'd you spotlight me, Dan?
Aren't you introducing the next?
Yes, Alicia, that was awesome. So vivid, really, really beautiful. Next in poetry, we have Courtney LeBlanc.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this. I know virtual is hard, but it's nice to see people's faces, and to see some of my friends in the virtual crowd is really, really nice. So I'm reading from my new book, Beautiful and Full of Monsters. I will post a link after I'm done reading. It just came out in March, and so I've not read anything in person yet because it came out, and 2 days later we went on lockdown. So, fun times. The first poem is titled End of a Relationship. Yesterday, which more or less lasted 7 years, we sat across from one another, coffee cups between us as the first line of defense. We chose a public place to conduct the final severing, the handing over of scattered objects after departure. 8 months ago, you left. Your suitcase sitting patiently by the door. Your ring, that pale circle of silver, dropped into the jar of sea glass I kept on the end table. 4 weeks later, the locks changed, the restraining order served. I handed over a paper bag stuffed full of you. My naked hands shook when I lifted the coffee to my lips. You pretended not to notice. You'd perfected not noticing. For once, I appreciated it. 2 days later, I walked into that same coffee shop and right into your girlfriend. She startled before shuffling quickly past. I ordered a coffee, large instead of my usual small. My hands didn't shake. The next one is titled Cut. First, I cut off my hands so I couldn't touch him, couldn't hold him. When this wasn't enough, I cut off my ears so I couldn't hear him whisper, "Good morning, beautiful." Next, I cut off my lips, my tongue, removed my ability to kiss him, to hold his name in my mouth. When none of these helped, when I still felt the dull ache for him, when he still haunted my dreams, I finally plunged the blade into my chest and cut out my heart, a glistening, wet muscle that echoed his name with each beat. It pounded wildly and then stopped, shuddered to silence. His name finally cut from me. The next poem is titled, I Guess We'll Have to Be Secretly in Love. To pull back, to not call you love or lover or gorgeous, to not tangle my hands in your hair, my legs in your legs, to not send you birthday wishes, which you hate to celebrate, but I love, or a Christmas gift wrapped in candy cane wrapping paper, which I hate to celebrate, but you love. To walk backwards out of the ocean, to not feel the sand being pulled back from under our feet, to not feel like drowning. To not smile at your painted toes, to say I love you to another name. To not even think your name, but keep it under my tongue like a pill I cannot allow myself to swallow. To not share sushi or champagne, to eat the whole plate, drink the whole bottle myself. To watch the days march forward without the ability to freeze time, to freeze the moment, to freeze the way you look at me in the morning. To not have your brow furrow when you realize I haven't slept. To never sleep again. To never hear your heavy breath or feel your arm reach for me in the dark. For sunrise to never come, for the sun to stop setting behind the palm trees, to never watch the ocean swallow it. To not remember your tattoo under my lips, to not trace a path with my fingertips, to not breathe the same air as you, to not breathe, to not. And then I just have one final poem I'm going to read for you. It's the last poem in the collection, and it's titled How to Survive Heartbreak. Acknowledge the wrecking ball in your chest, the slow heaving back and forth as it crashes against your heart. Brush your teeth, but avoid the mirror. Drape it with black cloth. Wail your prayers, drop to your knees, touch lips to the ground to remember you're here. Take fistfuls of dirt, fill your pockets, fill your mouth, plant seeds and add water. Wait for flowers to bloom. Tilt your face to the sun. Let the warm be the only thing that matters. Throw away your calendar and your watch. Stay awake till the stars come out. If you can't see the stars, drive deep into the country till they explode in the sky. Lie on your back. Feel the cool grass, hear the crickets, know the empty place inside you is not as infinite as the universe. Fill the void in your chest with stars and rocks and blades of grass. Thanks all.
Beautiful.
Indeed, that was gorgeous. Thank you, Courtney. And welcome back. We love to have our alums back to read again, especially when they just published their books. Congratulations. Okay, next in fiction, Zach Salai. Did I say that right?
You got it.
All right.
Wait, there we go. Can everyone hear me? Cool. Well, thanks for having me. And I hope everyone's doing well given, well, pretty much this entire fucking year. I'm going to read just a few pages from a short story that was recently published this winter in the Chattahoochee Review. I'll post a link to it when I'm done if you're so inclined to read the rest. And I'm going to start from the beginning, so there's not really much you need to know other than the title, which is Mr. Brayfogle. 3 years after my father collapsed in his woodshed and wasn't discovered for 2 days, my mother announced she was marrying Mr. Brayfogle, the man who'd buried him. This was in January of 2014. I was still an undergraduate at a modest university in Western Pennsylvania, consumed by aspirations to academia, spending my afternoons and nights and weekends in obscure corners of library stacks in pursuit of death. On this particular evening, while clouds spat snow across campus, I was at my usual desk in the Arts and Sciences Library trying to draft a short essay on, of all things, the graveyard poets. I'd been 5 lines into my 3rd reading of Thomas Gray's Churchyard Elegy. Now fades the glimmering landscape on the site, and all the air a solemn stillness holds, when I received an email from my mother. Wyeth, Mr. Brayfogle and I are getting married this spring. Will you be able to take time off school in late April? Call me, Mom. Mr. Brayfogle. Even then, on the eve of a marriage I'd suspected for months, he was Mr. Brayfogle. It was a joke the 3 of us had shared, my mother, my father, and I. We knew his first name too, of course. Everyone in our small Ohio town knew the funeral director. But perhaps in deference to the solemnity of his profession, we addressed him as Mr. Brayfogle, as if he were the father of some communal childhood friend. Occasionally, we'd bat his name around the family dinner table or point him out in a far corner of the Mexican restaurant one town over. My mother and father would wave or nod in passing. Once in a while, we'd stop by his table and they'd share a few polite words while I stared at the thick knuckles on Mr. Brayfogle's hands, the knobs of his finger joints, and imagined them deep in the belly of a dead music teacher or auto mechanic. In private, we had another name for Mr. Brayfogle, one my mother cautioned me and my father never to use outside the house. Digger. My father came up with that one. My mother, who would become Mr. Brayfogle's 4th wife, had known him several years before my father, her first husband, died. He'd been a loyal customer at the bank branch where my mother handled small business accounts, one of which was the account for Brayfogle and Sons Funeral Home. There were no sons save Mr. Brayfogle. He was the last. Her familiarity with Mr. Brayfogle's line of work, her inability to be intimidated by the nature of his occupation, her penchant for harmless flirtation, made it obvious why Mr. Brayfogle gave her the business. It also made it obvious why, when it came time for us to put my father in the ground, Brayfogle and Sons were the obvious people to trust. At the funeral home, at the gravesite, at the repast in the basement of our church, numb with shock at the call informing me of my father's heart attack, at how long my father could have gone missing while being so close to home, at how he'd just gotten his new knees 2 months earlier and hadn't had time to use them. During all this, I paid little attention to Mr. Brayfogle. Even when he came to hug my mother and share his condolences with our family, I avoided his hands. I didn't want to imagine where they'd been just a day earlier. I sat there and spooned scalloped potatoes into my mouth until my mother's crying in Mr. Brayfogle's arms became too much. Then I went outside and sat on the steps of the church to read Mallory's Mort d'Arthur and forget my father's plastic face in his casket. That fall, on a scholarship, I went off to college, to my mother's alma mater. Life tumbled on. My mother continued to work at the bank. I lost myself in the rhyming lines and rococo visions of long-dead romantic poets. A year later, we were back, at the same funeral home, the same graveyard, the same repast in the same church basement with the same scalloped potatoes. In the same long arms of Mr. Brayfogle, who offered his condolences again, this time for the passing of my mother's Aunt Linda. Mr. Brayfogle lingered by the table with my mother and her sisters, and when my mother patted the seat of the folding chair next to her, he unbuttoned his suit coat and obliged. This time I paid more attention to the man himself. Sinewy where my father had been portly, clean-shaven, where my father had sported the beard of a New England transcendentalist. Gregarious, where my father had excelled more at brooding, at moving through life in near monastic silence. The same blue eyes, like lake water at high noon. I wonder if my mother didn't look at those eyes, wrapped in wrinkles, and think my father was in there somewhere. Shortly thereafter, Mr. Breyfogel's name began to come up in my mother's weekly phone calls to me. She'd seen Mr. Breyfogel at the bank that morning sporting a handsome leather satchel, and did I need one for my books? She'd seen Mr. Breyfogel clipping shrubs outside the funeral home on her drive to step class. Then one day my mother called to say she'd had dinner with Mr. Breyfogel. We went to the country club, she said. The one Dad always said looked more like a nursing home. It's very classy inside. I had a dirty martini and a steak. Mr. Breyfogel suggested I get it medium rare for once, so I did, and it was delicious. Oh, I said. Thank you.
Nice. I don't know where it's going.
Okay, we are going to pause for a short intermission.
Did that work for everybody?
Yeah, that was awesome.
Great.
Welcome back, everybody.
That was cool. Thanks, Dan.
That was so cool.
I'm glad that worked.
We've lost a couple of people. We're down to 32.
A
and-
couple.
And we were up to 42, I think.
I think people come and go, so maybe they'll pop back in. Otherwise, I think let's forge on, and we'll start up with the next round. And I think Larry, you're kicking us off in nonfiction.
Yes, I am. And my piece is called Walk-In.
And just give me a second and I'll get you on the main screen here. Okay, you're all set, Larry.
Okay. Walk-In. Twilight, Tuesday, March 6th, 1967. A noisy three-wheel taxi pulled up at the broad steps of the monumental U.S. Embassy in New Delhi. The embassy had closed for the day. A handsome, neatly dressed woman in early middle age got out, paid the driver, and carried a small suitcase up the marble steps and through the oversized heavy doors to the entrance hall, where a uniformed U.S. Marine watchstander sat at a desk. There were no security hardlines in those days. She showed the Marine, Corporal Danny Wall, her Soviet passport and told him in English that she'd like to speak with an embassy officer. Corporal Wall calmly covered the passport while two late departing Americans walked through the lobby and exited, and he ushered a couple of Indian after-hours cleaning crew out of the lobby area. Then he accompanied the Soviet walk-in woman to a small security office off the lobby and asked her to wait there, please. The little room had just one door. He called several embassy officers, including Consular Officer George Huey, and asked them also to return to the embassy. Huey said he'll be there as fast as he can. The first officer to return to the embassy was Consular Officer Huey. Huey examined the lady's Soviet passport. It said her name was Svetlana Yusifovna Aliluyeva. She was born in Moscow, February 22, 1926, and entered India on December 20th, 1966. Nothing special. Then the lady looked at George Huey and told him she was Joseph Stalin's daughter. Let that sink in. Stalin's daughter. And now I'm going to skip ahead. The embassy was satisfied that she was really Stalin's daughter and they notified the ambassador, Chester Bowles. And Chief of Station David Blee made the judgment call that the defection of Stalin's daughter was not a priority for the CIA. His agency had no special interest in her. Her value to the US would not be for intelligence reasons. He would cooperate under the judgment of Ambassador Bowles, but he was content for the State Department to let the State Department make the decision to help Svetlana's defection. The American Embassy in New Delhi had to decide how to handle this totally unanticipated opportunity. There were 4 possibilities. 1, send her away. 2, formally grant her temporary asylum in the embassy. 3, spirit her out of the country covertly. Or 4, arrange for her to leave the country openly. Ambassador Bowles and Station Chief Blee went over each of the possibilities. 1, you could tell Svetlana that the embassy was closed for the day and she could come back and apply tomorrow, knowing that, of course, she wouldn't be able to do that. That would be contrary to Chester Bowles's most deeply held values as an American patriot and liberal. You could not send Svetlana away, notwithstanding that it was still possible that the walk-in lady was not who she said she was. 2, you could offer Svetlana temporary asylum in the embassy, inform the Indian government, and by extension the Soviets, that you were processing Stalin's daughter as if she was an ordinary person who had come to the embassy asking for political asylum. But she was not an ordinary person, and that's before even considering the bureaucratic mess that the State Department would encounter. 3, thus the ambassador decided they would arrange to take Svetlana out of India. It was clear that was what the lady herself wanted. But how? It might be possible for the CIA to arrange to get her out covertly. That would mean keeping Svetlana hidden for however long it would take to work out the details. The embassy people didn't know how long it would be before the Soviets or the Indians tracked her to the American embassy. It was possible she was seen traveling between the 2 embassies, and even possible that the Soviets already knew. Taking her out of India covertly, even if it was successful, would inevitably be exposed and it would look bad. 4, luckily, Svetlana had a valid travel document and Indian exit visa. The Soviet ambassador had ordered that her passport be returned to her that day. There was no legal reason why she couldn't depart India openly if she wanted to, and no limit on where she could go. Clearly, the best way for the Americans to proceed was openly and transparently, and above all, quickly, before the Soviets discovered that she had slipped out of their control and before they could alert the Indians to keep her from going anywhere but back to the USSR. The embassy would need to work quickly and discreetly. There was a substantial risk that this option wouldn't work, but even in the near worst case, they would be able to say they had acted responsibly and straightforwardly. In the end, it was an easy decision to opt for taking Svetlana Aliyeva out of India openly and without doing anything fancy. And that's just a part of the longer essay. And I was physically present at the embassy, and I knew most of the people who were involved.
Fascinating. Thank you, Larry. Next in poetry, I love the 4 names. Elizabeth Deanna Morris Lakes.
Hi. Yeah, my name's Elena Van Beck Pentameter. Elizabeth Deanne Morris Lakes. That's why there's so many. So I'm going to be reading from my book, which is called Ashley Sugarnatch and the Wolf, which is out from Mason Jar Press. It came out April 7th. I'm going to read a wolf poem, an Ashley poem, and then I'm going to read a love poem because I promised my husband that I would end every reading with a love poem that I wrote him as proof of my devotion to him. He, of course, is not here where he can hear me, but you know, it's still there for that reason. So the brief sort of context I'll give you is that there's two characters in Ashley Sugarnatch and the Wolf. That they're the two characters, and Ashley's a girl. Her father murdered her mother when she was 18 and about to go to college, and so she's processing that trauma. And the wolf is a human man during the day, but they dream about each other, and in those times he's a wolf, and he's like the mythic wolf, the big bad wolf. So. Oh, and also the wolf poems are all in syllabics. And then the Ashley poems are all in prose. The wolf always dreams. Ashley, I dreamt about you again last night. We sat in my room, all golden brown, light dust puffing up from piles and piles of books. Sitting at my feet, legs bent to the side, and I read to you from books while you fingered the hem of my khakis, touched the round bone of my ankle. You moved to your knees, touched my lapels. I wasn't even in a chair, just perched on a crate or a stack of books. You twisted the ends of my mustache and then pulled like Velcro, gave yourself a unibrow. You stuck your hands into the armholes of my sweater vest, squeezed the blades. But I couldn't get any closer. I was static as statue. I missed the days in our dreams when we would lie with our heads on the curb, legs in the street, and wait for the bus. The bus would never come, though. It was cloudy, and we didn't worry about our legs getting run over or our faces sunburnt. Sometimes I think we're meeting in these dreams. Midnight tryst. When I see you next, after the night you blush, you know you've spent the night asleep in me, touching the edges of me. Well, I remember how to let you reach my hand forward and press my palm around your cheek, the line of your jaw like a corner. Ashley Sugarnatch is not interested in love. I am not interested in love. Today, I saw a wolf that had been hit by a car, but it looked like it had been eaten by a car. The blood looked like a giant bow on a brand new vehicle, except it was tying the road closed. See, that's way more interesting than hearing an anecdote about how I tenderly, under many blankets, held hands last night with someone I had very much wanted to hold hands with for a very long time, which, in actuality, I did not. Instead, last night, I watched a documentary on giant squid. Giant squid have teeth-rimmed suckers, hundreds of tiny crowns. I thought about holding hands with the squid under the water, no scuba suit required, the water around our hands blossoming into roses. I am not interested in pursuit, in making memories. I saw a movie once where two people licked each other's faces and then cut off slivers of the other's legs. In the end, they turned into whales. It was supposed to be a movie representing marriage, but those two people from the movie got divorced. And now that I know that, I want to watch it backwards to undo it. That's what I want. My body undone and transformed. That movie's Drawing Restraint 9, by the way, which is like 3 hours long, and I saw it at midnight showing. And there's also a boat clown. It's one of the strangest movies I've ever seen. So this is a loose sonnet. It's from a crown of sonnets I wrote called, What is a Boat Clown? A boat clown is a clown on a boat, and that's where they are. And he has these children make a structure out of mud, and it seems very sad. Look up Drawing Restraint 9. So I wrote a bunch of sonnets called crush poems, each other crush poems, and they're all poems about crushes, except the last one, which is about love because it's about my Kenny. So it doesn't have a title for Kenny. I wondered what you could keep in the empty nest on your chin, but I should have known the answer was my hands, how easily they slid between the cinnamon red whiskers to hold your face. There was a day with all of them when I realized their absence was okay. I'll never not need you. I talk too much, and you gather the strings of words like ticker tape, roll them into balls to knit into more useful things. I hope I'm your most useful thing. I promise you can always find me in the humid breeze, in green, in our kids' eyes. I know if we are ever split, I'll find strands of your beard in unexpected places, a long closed book, my underwear drawer, my mouth, until I find it with my hands again. Thanks.
Nice. Very nice.
That was awesome. Okay. Let's see. Next in fiction, we have Andrea. I might butcher your last name. Is it Rugarello or Ruggiero?
Ruggiero.
Ruggiero. Okay. Andrea Ruggiero.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, the Inner Loop, for doing this, continuing to do this virtually. It's great to see everyone's faces, especially some friends in the virtual crowd. So I'm going to read the beginning of a short story. It's called Kids, and it was published in Hobart last year. So I'll link to it in the chat as well if folks want to read the rest. But this story is, so I've had this really obsession or interest, I guess, in Cabbage Patch Kids. If you all remember those dolls and the craze around those in the 90s. And so this story is me finally kind of putting that into words. All right. When we pressed our faces up through the dirt to gulp our first breath of air, the green and purple leaves that sprouted to mark the place of our birth were the first things we saw. Our face was the only part of us exposed to the elements, the sun warming our round cheeks and bald head. As we stretched our necks enough to see beyond the leaves, in our periphery, we could see each other, spread out, to the left and right and ahead, in rows neat as teeth. When the men came and dug us up to make way for the next crop, it took a sharp tug or two to free our limbs from where they were entangled with the earth. We lost finger and toenails, bled all over the white blankets we were wrapped in. We piled in wheelbarrows and wagons, were hoisted onto the backs of trucks, and with the rap of knuckles against steel, were sent speeding out of the patch and through the tunnel. Looking back, it's hard to remember if we heard the cries of the mother cabbage or if she let us go in peace. Babyland General was our destination. After dressing us in onesies and bonnets, the nurses squeezed us in, 8 or 9 to a crib. They stuffed our mouths with pacifiers, no matter how quiet we were, and we waited. The mothers began to arrive late the next morning, a steady stream of gaping mouths and wide eyes and gummy smiles made up of tiny white moons. The nurses were kind to the mothers. Especially kind was Marcia, who was younger than the rest, with corn silk hair that brushed our faces when she bent over to pull one of us free for a mother to hold. She'd tell the mother, "Oh, it looks like a match," with a knowing wink, and the mother would look shyly down at us before running off to beg an older mother to be allowed to take us home. At night, after the mothers had made their picks for the day, Marcia would hum lullabies to the rest of us as she rearranged our bedding and shifted our placement in the cribs. The other nurses whispered about her when she wasn't around. One called her loca and said that she took this job because of her abortion. We only knew that an abortion meant that Marcia had a baby once and now it was gone. We had no reaction to this news, not like the nurses who were angry or sad. We only wondered why she got rid of it. We wondered whether Marcia missed her baby, and if she would take one of us home one day to replace it. When we were with her, we only wondered if the warmth of her cheek against ours was something we'd ever forget. We would. The day we were chosen was always bittersweet, never any time to say goodbyes. In an instant, we were whisked past the shelves of clothes and toys and bottles, past the row of cotton candy colored strollers and into the adoption room. There, the adoption certificate was filled out with our new name, the name of the mother, and where our forever home would be. Some of the mothers were too young to sign their own name, so they drew a squiggle while an older mother or nurse held their hand. Whether this was legal, we don't know, but at the time we trusted they knew what they were doing. The names they selected for us covered the spectrum, from Alice or Sandy, to Pinky or Rex, to Princess or Love. We were named for other people, for what we look like, for who or what they wanted us to be. Then the oath. The mother clutched us to their chest and held up their right hand, not much bigger than our own. After they promised to always remember how special we were to them, there was a moment of silence, a space for the oath to solidify, take shape, and fill the void between the mother and us. This next ride was different than the one from the patch. This one was warm and slow, and we were held by someone who had just promised to love us with all her heart. Music filled the car, reminding us of Marsha's lullabies. Already her face blurred out of focus in our memories. The mothers' houses were all green lawns, open floor plans, swing sets in the back. Oh, we loved it when our mothers swung, with us in their laps, or just watching from a safe perch nearby. The whoosh of their hair, the flail of their legs, the joy that burst when they reached the peak, their toes stretched towards the sun. Things were sweet and easy. There was an occasional younger brother or a dog who caught hold of us, and some incidents involving spills and wet beds and washing machines, but our lives were good those first few days. Then came the birthday parties, the sleepovers, the after-school tea parties, show and tell. We met the others. They told us their stories, how they were stuffed into boxes, their wrists and ankles bound to cardboard, the days-long rides in the back of a dark truck, the shock of light when the back door rolled up, shifting from forklifts to pallets to warehouses to more truck rides and stockrooms, the thin but impenetrable plastic that separated them from any kind of touch. They were at least together on those crowded shelves, but unlike in the patch, they couldn't see each other. They could only hope that as they were pulled off the shelves one by one, that they would not be the last one chosen. So that's it for now, and I'll put the rest in the chat. Thank you.
Wow. That was super cute.
I'm devastated.
I have like goosebumps at the end. Okay, sorry, focusing. Oh, next in nonfiction, we're super happy to welcome back our friend Sam Nelson.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Great. I have to adjust my screen real quick, I'm sorry. I should be better at this because I'm doing this to children all day. Cool. Awesome. Well, first, I just want to thank Courtney and Rachel because they've let me read a few times now very graciously, and especially a few years ago back when I was dying for anybody paying attention to my writing. Interloop was a big deal, so I'm really, really grateful for that. And second, because I've got the microphone and I've been teaching, I'm a teacher, I want to do a show and tell real quick. This is my favorite stick. It is a aspen stick from a grove in Utah. It is part of the largest living organism, considered the largest living organism on Earth, because aspens are all connected underground. And I mention that because I'm actually moving to Utah soon, so that I can actually focus on writing, how to focus on convincing people to pay attention to trees and care more about the natural world before we're gone. So with that, I'm going to read an essay I wrote. It is called Kissing Trees in the Time of COVID. It was during the COVID crisis that I stopped kissing trees. The kissing thing started almost 10 years ago when I met a handsome old hardywood in New Orleans. It was a wide, live oak, reinforced in its trunk with concrete. It was many-limbed, dressed in Spanish moss, and older than any living thing I knew, almost 800 years old. I tried to hug it as tree huggers do, but it was too wide, so I leaned in. I puckered my lips, and planted a kiss on his furrowed bark. It was the first of many. I had a long-standing relationship with that tree, noble enough to earn a name, the McDonough oak. I rarely passed it without a kiss. When I left New Orleans, I packed my car, said goodbye to my human friends, and then stopped at the tree in City Park. I sat on a low, thick limb, eating a crawfish pie from the gas station, thinking of my love for the great big thing. Then I wiped the pie flakes from my lips, kissed it, and left. It's a good thing trees aren't like people, beholden to anthropocentric fantasies of lifelong monogamous romance. Because I've kissed many trees since, hundreds, thousands. I've kissed trees all over North America, gnarly dry junipers in the Utah desert, purple blossoming jacarandas in Mexico City, old growth white pines in Ontario. In DC, I've kissed a statistically significant percentage of trees in the National Arboretum, all the surviving American elms in Mount Pleasant, and most of the great tulip poplars on the valley ridges of Rock Creek. They all drew me in. They were all special. Kissing became ritual, even instinctive, until COVID. Many of us have heard and read so much about the coronavirus to feel like budding epidemiologists. But to me, all that detail congeals into lump sum conclusions. And what I know about the virus is this: it loves an open mouth. Puckering lips are especially inviting. Kissing people is bad, but kissing public surfaces is far worse. A perfect trap for infection. And so I find myself face to wooden face with a gorgeous beach in Rock Creek Park. And I ask myself this absurd question: is it safe to kiss this tree? It seems unlikely another person has put their lips on this same tree, on this same spot in the last 72 hours. But it's not impossible. I am proof that it's not impossible. I think I kissed this exact tree not long ago. How many others in this park, on this trail? A lot. How many have I touched, grazing my unwashed palm against them as I swept by? A lot. I like a thick old tree. Who doesn't? Consider the beach. Its bark skin is smooth. It shows old... I'm sorry, I see Rachel Cordy cracking up in that. Let me back up. Consider the beach. Its bark skin is smooth. It shows old wounds from the initials of long ago lovers that have since healed over. We're both scarred. We both show some roots that hide our foundations under the surface, a wet hidden web of shared stuff. We both grow, but one of us is prettier than the other. The beach is round and dapper, and if you press your cheek against it on this spring day, it radiates warmth. The beach is older than me, and if we're both lucky, it will outlive me. Why shouldn't I kiss it? Isn't that desire natural? A kiss is my way to reconnect, not just with this tree, but with nature, with the woods, with the soil from where we spring. A kiss is a connection. It shows gratitude for gifts. Trees give us shade, beauty, oxygen. They keep great swaths of earth from washing away in mud and water. They absorb our pollutants. They breathe in the waste of our lungs and make it fresh again. A kiss says, I love you. A kiss says, we share genetic code. A kiss says, I can't live without you. Or maybe I just don't want to. Sometimes it's hard to love plants and people at the same time. I'm not always sure we go together. I see plants flourishing in our absence. I read about their death amidst our insistence on expansion. But I don't pity plants. Instead, in the last few years, they started to replace some human friends who are sometimes too restless and mobile to keep up with. Plants stay still. I know where to find them. They're grounded, and I love them for that. At the last Women's March, I was strolling with the crowd down 15th Street toward Washington Monument when I saw a grove of magnolias in President's Park. I couldn't help it. I crossed the street. I left the parade to inspect the winter buds. They were as big as thumbs, as soft as puppy ears. The parade for gender equity and well-deserved human rights left me behind while I nuzzled the trees and kissed a branch or two. I was fine with it. I am who I am. I like what I like. I know I should be cheering for Team Human, marching with them. But more and more, I'm rooting for Team Plants. Sometimes I think COVID-19 is a dramatic expression of our collective imbalance with nature. Call it regulatory feedback or divine punishment or just a hard luck virus. But a human messed with a bat that should have been left alone, and it made them sick. We breached nature's deepest, most private spaces, and it's made us sick. People got in cars, trains, airplanes, fueled by the plunder of carbon long ago buried deep in the Earth's crust. The life element that trees eat from thin air. And we burned it to zoom across an increasingly high-watered Earth, carrying the virus with us. And it's made us very sick. I'm out in a wooded park, and I see people. I avoid them. As I jostle for position under a tall tulip poplar, as I think about kissing him, I hear footsteps. I see a man with a dog walking toward me on the trail. He sneezes. I know he's not a virus, but he could be a carrier of the virus. I try to make a distinction between the two. The longer this goes, the longer we do this, the harder that is. Thank you all so much. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. And I welcome your feedback as well.
Thank you, Sam. That was, yes, Rachel was making fun of me because she knows I'm a tree hugger. So I was here for that.
As long as you don't escape to Utah with Sam, I'm so sad Sam is leaving us. I'm going to cry a little after this.
But we're excited for your journey.
He could be already in Utah.
It's true. True, Larry. Okay, next in poetry, we have Kaylee McHale.
Hi. Hi. Okay. Let me get this going. Okay. Oh no. Okay. All right, so I've got 4 poems today. The first of which is appearing, I think, coming out tomorrow in BlazeVox online. So it will be there. All right. So this is called The Fly. 100 feet from my window, a voice calls. Through the long grass, the heather, the enormous rustling. From 100 feet away, a voice is faint and sounds like whispers, though for sure it could be a shout. Her eyes rest just above an uncertain horizon line, dictated by how weeds and plants force their strength against the wind or pounds heavy fog. Round and warm. I am not afraid of the eyes that rest on the horizon, and I am not afraid of the cheekbones those eyes rest upon more often than the horizon, rounded like apples in my mother's cheeks. Every step to her is a waist-deep sinking into a ground uncertain with rain. I crush extensive and shallow root systems, the veins that share hot bloods between conjoined stalks. And then she lifts me, a beautiful fat fly with a face like my mother's and so many strong legs. She saves me my destruction and grants me flight, only in her arms, only at night. I return home with identical holes in both my cheeks, like dimples, the size of her tubed lips. And who would I be not to offer my excess softness to the god of tall and soft grasses? All right. Next one is called The Gourd, the Rabbit, the Fly. A lot of these poems are set in the English moors, if that's helpful. Okay. So, The Gourd, the Rabbit, the Fly. An orange gourd hollowed out among green and purple grasses, the scent strong, fibrous somehow. Its seeded interior strewn across the path underfoot and fresh smells like rot, as fresh things that resemble intestines seem to do. A trick of the gory mind, seeing the gory body in a gory world, and yet the innards seem to steam in the cool morning as if just pulled rope by rope onto the wet ground. A fly, wandering inside the stinking labyrinthine interior of a rabbit who died with his eyes closed and seeds between his sharp teeth, so, in a way, happy. The gourd got fat on dirt and rain. The rabbit got fat on gourd. The fly got fat on rabbit and gourd. The fly made a home in the belly of the rabbit until it was no longer warm and inviting, and the fly was ready to be born. The mist on the moor is low today, filling old footprints in the path as water fills two hands cupped, meaning for a short time. This next one is called Pleasure Thermometer, and we've got a line from Keats's letters in there, if anyone notices it. I didn't steal it, I'm giving him credit. Pleasure Thermometer. For a life of running your flat thumbprint against the limestone, for scraping it off and leaving it behind, it was always morning. There is nothing stable in the world. Uproar's your only music. In the high sounds of each finger pad scraping against each jagged rock face sing in delicious harmony. I saw her standing in the dark, upstream, unsure in the current, washing herself clean. I felt her feel the coldness of the air, the different coldness of the stream, and a third coldness. I saw her say, oh, oh, with her pink sweet mouth, tongue scraped of taste buds, jaw dropped rounded low like a divine entrance. Do whatever you were going to do, gently. She tells the stream. She tells us. She strums a nearby sudden harp. All right, finally, I have a poem called The Rabbit Loses His Outline, and that's going to be in the July issue of Radar Poetry. The rabbit falls asleep in his nest, his chest rising and falling almost imperceptibly in the shadows of tall grasses blown by this constant, searching cold wind. The rabbit falls asleep in his nest, which once belonged to a very large bird. It was made of the softest things, velvety stalks and human hair, mosses of all colors. He found this nest on the ground, waiting for him, brought down from some tall tree and carried through the moor by sharp gusts, jerky movements, gentle hands. The rabbit sleeps on a single broken egg. The rabbit, slowly, with each breath and small break, loses his outline. Slowly, he opens up in ways he hasn't before. The shocking white shell is him now, and he can feel each sharp, cracked edge with sudden understanding of how it feels to fragment, to feel cold air on the inside walls. He sleeps and breathes and is the nest, is lovingly made and dearly missed. The rabbit is the bird, too, sleeping where the bird was always meant to sleep. He knows, through deep memory, how to catch currents high in the air, to dip in and out of wind as fish dip in and out of water. He can feel when a single feather is out of place. The rabbit is the wind, then. He sleeps and loses his outline and blows away, piece by piece. He remembers once the wind was born a single gorgeous power, pure tumbling energy wrestling with itself, like young rabbits in dark burrows beneath our feet. Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting me to read. It was great.
Gorgeous, Kaylee, thank you. I also have birds nesting right outside my window, right outside my office, and I just hear them all day long, like flying into the roof and like scuttling around and collecting things. So I really liked hearing about the soft things that are part of the nest. Next in nonfiction, TJ Butler.
Hi there. Thank you so very much for having me. Oh, sorry. So this is a nonfiction piece, and it's called You Don't Notice It Until It's Missing. The first time I picked out the hidden chords of the bass guitar was the last time I saw my father. I did not know him, an aging musician with only 3 things to remember him by: long, graying hair, a broad, tarnished brass belt buckle the size of a pack of smokes, embossed with the words, "The South will rise again," and framed black and white photos of himself on stage with famous country musicians who would not remember his name once the tour was over. He did not know me either, a new teenager on a 1-week pass from a group home, a stranger wearing a Led Zeppelin t-shirt and a hand-me-down jean jacket. I asked him for cigarettes, taking a chance he'd want to be that cool dad. I stood on his deck later, focused on making a cigarette burn on the cuff of my jacket. It would be proof that I'd had contraband while I was away. As a child, I learned to read by sounding out the lyrics on the liner notes of my mother's record collection. Cat Stevens songs did not have difficult words. She took half of my father's records in the divorce, but I suspect he kept the valuable ones. Thus, my father and I had music in common. It had not connected us over the miles or the years, but we had nothing else to talk about. He showed me how to identify the bass guitar in music. Invisible, yet also a backbone. You don't notice it until it's missing, he said. He played the old Creedence Clearwater Revival song, Have You Ever Seen the Rain, tapping out the chords of his instrument on his thigh. Dun, dun, dun. I followed his lead, and we tapped our thighs in unison. Dun, dun, dun. Parkinson's disease overtook him more than 2 decades later. My younger sister drove 10 hours to wait for the end. I did not go with her. I remember myself at 14, tapping the bass line on my jeans in a Nashville living room far more vividly than I remember the man who showed me the tapping. I do not believe you only notice the bass when it's missing. Since that cigarette-burned jean jacket, I have not been able to hear anything else. Thank you so much.
That was short.
Yeah, that was a short one. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Faye. That was beautiful. Thank you for bringing us home.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our readers. A little virtual.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody you can unmute and clap now if you want. That was awesome.
I'm putting you on gallery view. So
yeah, I know. Me too. Gallery view is great.
Usually Courtney is the one who gets all sappy after an event, but I'm going to get a little sappy because I'm just so grateful that people are making time for the inner loop. You know, we always have like 40 or 50 people come to the live events, and last month we had about 50 people come to the virtual event, and this month we've had 30 to 40 people participating. And it's just so heartening, and I am so inspired by the community sort of being able to be translated into this virtual world, which is more difficult and stranger, especially for me. Like, I don't join any virtual programming because it just feels like work a little bit or just weird. So anyway, I'm just grateful to everyone for showing up and continuing the community feeling in this new environment.
Yeah, I just want to second all of that as my dad walks in and starts howling at the dog. Please stop. This is a nice house. So I am really, really, really grateful.
Also super inspired, I have to say, by Lewis's story, which is so like relevant. I haven't been able to write about the quarantine at all, even though I feel like we all should be writing about it right now. But I'm a percolator, so I'm just gonna like store away little images and write.
I think Sam did. Sam did for sure.
What's that?
Sam wrote about it too. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Sam did. See.
Yeah. I picked up a lot of weird little habits during quarantine, and that's really what I'm writing about. It just happens to take place during coronavirus times. I have another essay about whittling sticks, which you're spared of tonight.
I love it. Also, Lou, thank you for joining us as featured reader. We're super
My pleasure. Thank you.
to have you here. And thanks to everyone for experimenting with us during the breakout rooms. It was really fun to chat with a couple of you. So it was great.
We'll see you all next month. When is the next?
June.
It's June. When is it, Courtney? 16th.
Yes. So we'll be back. We'll hope to see you. And in the meantime, everyone, stay safe, stay sane, all those obnoxious things you've been hearing for the past,
Tune into the Innovative Radio for more inspiration and community.
And submit to the writing contest. Okay.
Super.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Bye, everybody.